came along about 5 o'clock to set things up, thinking, the weather would be good. And I took some time to clear the deck of all the leaves. And then there was a lot in the pond, so I took some time with the net. And I was just about getting to the end of things. Not many leaves left in the pond. The deck was nice and clear. And then came a lot of wind, and suddenly the whole deck was covered in leaves again, and the pond was full of leaves again. And, it was funny. And it also reminded me, though, it's like, oh yeah, if I'm clearing the leaves to get the job done, then it's futile, doesn't work, and 2, maybe it's frustrating as well. All that work, and now the leaves are back. And yet, the invitation, right, is just to clear the leaves for the love of it. For the love of it. A certain kind of quiet enjoyment of doing it, but it was only really when the wind came and blew all the leaves back again that it really reminded me, hey, don't fall into that trap of trying to get the job done. Just for the love of it. And then that sense of, just the feeling and the gesture and the movement and the water and the sound and the leaves and the ordinary miracle. And then in that moment, it sort of was like a kind of reminder of that same insight, basically, that same teaching so many times. When I first got to the monastery in Thailand in 1990, and that was my job, was sweeping paths. And I was used to living in Europe and not among bamboos, where the leaves just fall in the autumn. And so then there's a certain sense to clearing the leaves, because then it's done, right? And then there's no more leaves left in the winter. But in a tropical place, or living among bamboo, like you see here, no, there's no season to them. They just fall all the time. So when I was given that job to sweep the paths, I'd sweep the path, but the next morning, it would need sweeping again. And I just remember how reactive I was about that. It seemed to be a waste of time to me. Why bother sweeping the path when it's just going to be covered in leaves again tomorrow? It took me a while to realize that wasn't the point. The idea, that it refers to the work period here in the mornings through that yogic term of karma yoga. And that's the whole essence of karma yoga, right? Is renouncing, letting go of, giving up the burden of being responsible for getting the job done. That's too much responsibility. Instead, you just be responsible for the engagement with the moment, responsible for the gesture, the action. Reminded me then in turn of it's one of the pieces in my book that people often refer back to, this time of painting the windows in my teacher's ashram, and it stopping me. I got excited about painting the windows. The paint was old and flaking off, and I went to town and I bought some new red paint. I was going to paint the windows red. And got stuck into it with that kind of enthusiasm. And then he stopped me and I said, Martin, he said, your problem is you're trying to paint the windows. I said, no. I said, let God paint the windows. You just take care of the brush stroke. Oh, it's incredibly well. I didn't expect to be so moved, just remember. It was incredibly, 30 something years later, it was incredibly moving and powerful and relieving for me to give up that responsibility and to just, the contact paint, brush, movement, presence, devotion. And that sense, then, when it was done, when the brush strokes were done, that surprising sense in looking back, like, oh, look at those, they're red, they're new, they're beautiful. And that feeling that somehow the windows have painted themselves might be a more Buddhist framing of it, or God has painted the windows. Obviously, my teacher framed it. But in a sort of direct contrast to the usual way we might imagine it, that sense of taking satisfaction in one's work, in having done a good job, actually it was much more gratifying, much more satisfying to not see it as the results of my work, but actually to just to just feel like I was the beneficiary of these new beautiful windows. So I wanted to talk about love and loving awareness this afternoon. And that's an interesting way in a way, because I'd like to speak about it from two, possibly three angles or directions. It's a bit like the two opposite angles of path and fruit that we spoke about this morning. The first angle then is that sense of the way we can arouse qualities of loving awareness, the way we can have the sense of cultivating, intentionally cultivating loving awareness, being the lover, so the one who is investing this moment, investing this action, investing this moment with quality of care, of tenderness, of gentleness, of appreciation, etc. And then the other angle is the sense of actually, being the recipient of. On the one hand, investing that moment of painting the windows with love, or investing that moment of scooping leaves from the pond with quality of caring presence. And yet, and that on the other side, that sense of being the recipient of, being it's like recipient of these new windows, actually being the one who is being loved by the moment. And that's a much less common framing. It's a framing that's very much available in meditation practice. I would say very crucial, actually. Again, it's too much work to have to be the one always. I have to be loving every moment. Just as important to be able to actually be loved by the moment. And so I'd like to just see how that works in some of the classic framings of the free heart, the Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, mudita, care, compassion, delight or joy, spaciousness, openness of heart. And maybe with some other heart qualities as well. Metta, loving kindness. My preferred translation is just care or friendliness, goodwill. And please see for yourself, your relationship to these qualities as we go through them. So what's the relationship to metta? Where does metta come from? How does metta get generated? Who is the agent of metta? And of course, there's moments where we feel like, oh, I'm being caring, I'm being friendly, I'm emitting that sense of warmth towards my own experience or towards somebody else or towards just whatever's happening. It's all kinds of beneficial qualities to that. It's relaxing. It's relaxing to the nervous system. I feel like these ones are kind of emitting this radiant sense of warmth, care, friendliness. It's also relaxing to our sort of restless, neurotic, and over-worrying mind. Worry and doubt tend to subside to a great extent when there's that climate of warm, caring, friendly attitude. Worry and doubt go along very, very closely with judgment. Friendliness, kind of a warm, accepting, welcoming friendliness is the opposite of judgment. Often we speak about the opposite of judgment as just being non-judgment. To be non-judgmental. But it's a bit cold. It's a bit neutral. The opposite of judgment isn't just a lack of judgment. The opposite is it's genuine acceptance. It's welcome. It's loving what is, caring for what's here, rather than evaluating, dismissing, categorizing, criticizing. And well enough versed in Dharma practice to be familiar with that intentional cultivation. Let me give a friendly attention, a warm-hearted attention, benevolent attention. I know I'm giving lots of synonyms, but it's partly because I find those words themselves actually very evocative. Benevolent, caring, tender, friendly. Sometimes just the words can be a reminder to us to feel for that quality of awareness. Or they can be a reminder to us of, oh, yeah, those qualities have somehow gotten a little forgotten or pushed out. And maybe some worry or doubt or judgment has snuck in. So just the remembrance of metta, the remembrance that there is no moment really, no experience that doesn't benefit from us offering it a warm, a friendly, caring attention. So there's the sense of right oneself as the agent of metta, arousing metta, offering metta. But just as this opposite angle, which we might be less familiar with, putting down the responsibility. Is it not equally possible to experience this moment as if the moment is friendly towards you, caring for you? Like just walking up and down and walking meditation. Right, we can say we're just caring for this footstep, caring for the contact between foot and earth. But equally, we could experience that as being cared for, being cared for by the earth. Just, the way grass caresses skin, the way earth supports the weight. And just to give a sense of the difference, the difference between the sense of arousing metta, offering metta, on the one hand, and the sense of being bathed in, the sense of receiving metta, the sense of being cared for. And again, you can see for yourself in your practice, but I'm sure there's some moments where that sense of attuning to being the recipient of these heart qualities, being the recipient of loving awareness, might be more helpful, more necessary, more soothing than having to be the producer of, the offerer of loving awareness. So on the one hand, in that sense, we can offer loving awareness to our experience. And that's one way of describing the essence of our practice. But on the other hand, we can also have that sense of being loved by awareness. And you might recognize that. Yeah. Awareness is holding this experience, caring for this experience. And whatever I mean by me in this moment, however the sense of self might be constellated, I can let it be cared for. That might seem recognizable, accessible, seem like it's one of the resting places of the heart. One of the ways in which you move through much of your experience. Or it might feel inaccessible, strange even. You might find yourself kind of groping. But how could that be? What would that mean? Awareness just loving me. So if it seems inaccessible or strange in some way, please don't grasp for it. Maybe just to let it be a little background as a possibility. And so too, then I don't want to go into a lot of detail with all four of the Brahma Viharas, but just a reminder, right, in the ways in which there are four distinct facets of loving awareness. So metta is that general sense of friendliness, warmth, care, like we say. No moment doesn't benefit from a climate of welcome and warmth. And then karuna, compassion, has a different nuance. It's specifically loving awareness in the face of what's painful. And so again, the sense of, well, let me be compassionate with this painful experience. Let me be tender with this experience. Let me be responsive to. Again, we're very familiar with the way that's really helpful. that which is painful longs for compassion. That which is painful just wants to be tended to. We're making a little contemplative space for to see that from the other way around, rather than I've got to be compassionate towards my aching body, my restless mind, my troubled heart. Is there a way in which I can actually be the recipient of a wider field, a more natural field, as if awareness itself, as if its nature is loving in this sense, in the form of compassion. As if the very nature of awareness is to reach out, to tend to soothe that which is painful. So that again, one gets the relief from having to be the one who is responsible for compassion. So on the one hand, we can speak about these as coming from two different angles, right? One, offering loving awareness, or the one being the recipient of loving awareness. On the other hand, we can speak of them in the first case as being, something that's aroused and cultivated. And then on the other hand, something that's an inherent quality. It's like, that's what we taste. Oh, there's a movement, right, from me and my practice, and therefore me and my metta, me and my compassion, me and my loving awareness, to a sense of just listening for, feeling for, recognizing and resting in the inherently caring nature of awareness, the inherent lovingness of awareness, the inherent capacity of awareness to tend compassionately to that which is painful. And then the relief from having to be the one who's doing it. Same for mudita. Mudita is that facet of loving awareness, which is the flavor of love, which is joyful, appreciative, that which delights in beauty. So whereas compassion tends to the painful, mudita delights in the beautiful. It's that quality of love which, it fizzes in the heart. Wonder, gratitude, appreciation, delight. Oh, oh, oh. And of course, like all of these facets of loving awareness can arise just naturally, spontaneously. Maybe today there's been something which you've been delighted by, like lunch, or whatever it might be, and it can be cultivated. A sense of remembering, it's much to appreciate, especially when we might notice we've got the habit to sort of habit that sometimes we have of looking for something that's wrong, looking for something to complain about. Oh, there's much to appreciate. And so actually that, again, that's the arousing, the cultivating of loving awareness in the form of appreciation, gratitude, wonder. And yet also, maybe it's possible to orientate to that in that opposite direction. As if, it might sound a little anthropomorphic, but as if life is delighting in me. As if life is delighting in you. If compassion can be known as that way in which life is holding you, caring for you, actually offering the soothing balm of loving awareness to your pain. In that same way, mudita might show us, or we might have that experience as if love is delighting in this ordinary miracle that we are, this functioning body, this feeling heart, this particular brilliance that you are, with your particular skill set, with your particular set of experience, with your particular sensitivities. It's a different way to experience mudita. Again, not having to just be the one. It's wonderful to be that one which can arouse joy and appreciation and gratitude. But equally important to be able to be that in which life, for which life is grateful, we could even say. That's it. Life is delighting in the dancing of these cells, in the beating of this heart. It might sound a little indulgent, right? Oh, life is really enjoying the beating of my heart. But of course, that's not what's actually happening in the experience. It's actually the opposite of indulgent. It's rather humbling, soothing. There's some kind of some kind of wonder and mystery in the fact that we get to just be here for this beating heart. We get to somehow be here at this interface where life is caring for this experience. Same with upeka, the last of the four Brahma viharas, often translated as equanimity. Just this sense of vastness. That's the flavor of equanimity, of upeka, right? That sense of just a wide open. A quality of love that's wide enough to allow for the comings and goings, the vicissitudes, the fact that things change, the fact that one minute we're happy and the next we're not, and there's gain and loss and pleasure and pain and all of that. And that capacity to love it all in a very, very, very wide, loose, loving embrace. And actually, upeka is that quality that lends itself most readily to this opposite angle, to being a recipient of. It's very hard for me to have a vast heart. My heart tends to be limited by what's going on for me and what's going on for those I care about. And the sense actually of my love, my capacity to manage all of this is inherently limited. The kind of the immensity of suffering, for example, as well as the boundlessness of beauty. How can my heart manage all of that? It can't. It can't. And yet, most essentially, loving awareness isn't a feature of my heart. Awareness isn't bound by the agency of self, isn't a property of self. And so maybe the more accessible way into that quality, right, of just a wide open heart, is in the sense of being the recipient of letting that sense color your experience of awareness being wide open, a vast, loving embrace. So those four flavors in the tradition, they cover all the bases, right, of loving awareness, attending to whatever the quality of experience is. Just general experience, not too intense, not too painful, not particularly beautiful, metta, that sense of general just friendliness towards. And sometimes experience is painful, compassion, tending to. And then sometimes experience is beautiful, mudita, that delighting in. And then upekkha, wide open sense of just allowing it all. And particularly, when one feels some doubt or worry or discouragement or apathy or confusion or just anything that sort of hijacks the goodness of your practice. Sometimes we're just running on the goodness of our practice. But when something comes along to hijack that, then just feeling for the one of these qualities that might be a good support. So that this sense we have of loving awareness isn't just abstract. It sounds good, of course it does. It sounds good, loving awareness. But what does that mean? What's the flavor of love we're talking about? Love is too much of a general term. Other qualities that, in addition to the Brahma Viharas, that I think are there in the tradition and that quite naturally carry nuances of loving awareness. One is dana, generosity. It's one of the reasons it's spoke about in the tradition, but it talks about dana as a foundation for happiness. The love that's there in giving, offering, supporting. Sense we sort of know it instinctively to give to support one we feel moved to support one that we feel is deserving of support is an act of love. It's an act of love, but we're also the recipient. We love to give support. Sometimes, some of us, it's easier to, again, be the agent of, the one who's giving, than it is to be the recipient of. So it's just like with the way we've explored these other qualities from both angles. It's absolutely just as important for our practice that we let ourselves be the receiver of, the kind of gracious receivers of blessings. Whether that's the generosity of when people give us something. And some of us, sometimes we feel awkward. We sort of brush it off, or we give an elaborate, overly elaborate thanks, or we say, it's funny, say, oh, you shouldn't have. I don't know if that's in all languages, but certainly in English and in French as well. Oh, il fallait pas. So kind of fending off rather than thank you. Oh, thank you. Graciously receiving. Expression of loving awareness. And then that too, that sense of being the recipient of life's generosity. And devotion. Devotion is it's exquisite, powerful, beautiful quality that's runs on the energy of loving awareness. And it's one of the qualities I think that we sort of didn't do a very good job of importing from the Asian context that these teachings and practices came from into our kind of more psychological, more individualistic, more modern or postmodern or whatever, more rational European context. In some sense that we don't want to just we don't want to bring all that temple stuff. You know, we bring the practices, we bring meditation. And you know, and I think that was probably a really wise decision in the 60s to not try and bring all the temples and all the wholesale cultural baggage. But devotion isn't cultural baggage. Devotion is it's the gesture through which loving awareness runs. And you might see for yourself, you know, sometimes people come here on retreat and you're all maybe used to retreats, but maybe you're not, you know, you may have done much of your retreat practice in places where there's not much of a shrine, for example, or where there's no bowing, or there's no chanting. And so those things might feel a little strange, unfamiliar. And then it can feel a little awkward with that. To me, there's something, you know, of course, it's like so many decades and so many monasteries and temples and a lot of years in Asian countries, something that this gesture is so replete with the feeling of loving awareness. To come down to the shrine. And it's pretty universal, you know, across cultures and religions and countries. You know, but this gesture as some kind of gesture of greeting, of respect, of gratitude. You know. So much so that it's, you know, it's one of the most standard emojis, right? You know, it's the, I would say 60% of my responses I send to texts, you know, most of what I want to say can be communicated just with that emoji. So if you're someone for whom that gesture is unfamiliar, or the idea of, you know, like entering and leaving the hall, for example, is unfamiliar, there's absolutely no pressure or requirement to make that gesture. But I would really encourage you, what's the relationship to devotion? What's worth being devoted to? What's the energy that comes along with a gesture of devotion? How might your devotion be expressed? And if there's not much of a relationship to devotion, what might be missing? I just come back from South Korea a few days ago, and I was there with a group of students, and we were we were on a kind of temple tour, staying in rural monasteries and practicing in these different monasteries, and you know, some really fantastic old temples in South Korea, and some really fantastic, great, big, giant golden Buddhas, and lots of places, lots of opportunity for bowing, basically. And, I just had so many opportunities to reflect how much I would just so much enjoy go to the temple, stand, make the bow, and then like to circumambulate, which is classic kind of Buddhist practice. In some traditions more than others, but just to you go greet the Buddha and then walk around the outside of the temple. Right. One goes around just once, or you go around 3 times, etc. And sometimes one goes around with, you know, riding on a mantra, as it were, and just go around with this sense of appreciation. You might go around this recollection of kind of lineage and tradition, sense of all those people who've walked around this temple, all the care that's gone into building this temple, all the incredible, intricate wooden carvings of these temples. Spent some time at Songwasa, which is a monastery in the south of Korea, where Martin Batchelor, who maybe some of you know, was a nun for 10 years in that place. And so it was, having known Martine for many years and having heard much of that monastery from her, was very touching to go. It's a big monastery. I had some sense of her in some tiny little rural hermitage, but no, it's a big, busy monastery with one of them, lots of temple structures. And since it was first founded in about 800 and something, in the Common Era, so it's 1200 years ago. In those 1200 years, it's burned down 8 times. It's been destroyed 8 times, sometimes by fire, sometimes by invasion, and they've rebuilt it 8 times. Just mind blowing to see these temples that could be built once. 8 times, just then it burns down. Okay, start again. You know, it's a bit like the brushing the leaves, right? But the scale is somewhat different. Just incredibly touching. You know, devotion. To underestimate the power of devotion. The gladness of heart, the depth of heart, the trueness of heart. That sense of giving oneself to that which seems worthy of the gift of one's heart, the gift of one's time, the gift of one's attention. Precious resources. Attention is a precious resource. What are you going to devote it to? It doesn't have to be, you know, in a sort of whole life sense, but just moment by moment. You're here for a couple of weeks. Your attention is a precious resource. What are you going to devote it to? And then playfulness. Playfulness. There's shades of loving awareness. Sometimes can feel a little serious, all this meditation stuff. The silence sometimes can increase the sense of seriousness and just our own, you know, our own tendency to take ourselves too seriously, to take, you know, to take our ideas too seriously, to take our doubts and worries too seriously. Oh, playfulness. To inhabit our practice playfully. Maybe along with the devotion, I think playfulness got a bit lost sometimes in the transition. And maybe even when we go to a monastery or something, and because it might feel a little exotic, or we go to a temple and we're not sure, you know, they bow differently in different places. One of the temples we were in Korea, we got very, very clear instructions on exactly how to bow. And I thought, oh no, because I'd been giving people this sense, it doesn't matter too much. Just, and then we got this one young monk giving like, you bow like this, you bow like, you do this with your feet, and you do this 3 times, and when you get down to this, you do, and then you turn your hand over, and I could feel the people like, oh, freezing up, you know, getting worried about doing it right. And of course, there can be a beauty in learning the form and respecting the form of the way that it's practiced. But please know here, there's no strict instructions for bowing, or, you know, for anything really. To see if we can inhabit, you know, just a footstep, or washing up, or whatever it is you're doing, the sitting still in a playful way. And in a context like this, playful isn't, it's not a kind of loud, exuberant, agitating playfulness. It's just, it's going to be probably a quieter current of an expression of loving awareness. Hanging out in the playground of your mind. What makes the difference as to whether mind is a playground or a prison? And it can change from one to the other in a moment. But a big part of what makes the difference as to whether mind is a prison or a playground is whether we're able to inhabit it lightly, playfully, lovingly. So on the one hand, the sense of all these qualities of love are ones we can orientate towards, ones we can arouse, ones we can cultivate. Being the lover of this moment. And on the other hand, like we say, these are all qualities that we can let ourselves be blessed by or loved by, ones we can be the recipient of. And in closing, just to point to the third possibility, and we'll get into this a little more in the next couple of days. The real fruition of loving awareness is the dissolution of offering and receiving, where we're neither having to give love nor be given. Rather, we recognize that the essential perfuming of the whole atmosphere of experience, the whole boundless theater of awareness where everything is happening, the whole ocean of immediacy, which is our only home, constant home, is animated by love, is moved by love. Love which is most fundamentally neither given nor received. There's just that in which the wind blows and the leaves fall and the breath comes in and out, in which thoughts appear and disappear, in which heart beats and skin cells renew, in which we live and die. We cultivate loving awareness. Be blessed by loving awareness. May we find our home in loving awareness. May we know ourselves and all things